Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on how do you captivate your target audience with an all around customer identity experience with Okta and with some of the best of breed solutions whom we partner with. First, I'd like to introduce our team here. So, my name is Payal Pan, and I'm a regional principal solutions engineer at Okta, focused on enabling our customers with strategic business solutions tied to all the aspects of identity and access management. Along with me, we have Sandeep Kumbat, Master Principal Solutions Architect, helping Okta's top global customers. And he also leads Okta's Product Field Center of Excellence group. And then we have Andy March, our Senior Platform Specialist with Okta, based in EMEA, and he's focused on customer identity. And we have our special guest from Crate and Barrel today, Christine Diaz Garvey, and I'll let her introduce herself in a minute. So, our agenda for today. So, Christine has joined us today to talk about how Crate and Barrel is creating an engaging and personalized experience across their brands with Okta, and also talk about their overall customer journey. Following that, we will get into the details and demos on the end to end customer journey with Okta and some of the best of breed solutions, while also ensuring security at all the touch points along the journey from acquisition, engagement to retention, and finally touch on security and privacy and compliance, which is critical. Please feel free to ask questions at any time on chat. And with that, I will hand it off to Christine. Christine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Pyle. I'm so excited to be here to talk about Crate and CB2's Okta implementation. So a little bit about me. I'm Christine Diaz-Garvey. I'm the Senior Manager of Customer Data and Personalization Enablement for Crate and Barrel, CB2, and Hudson Grace. I was the product manager and project manager for the Okta implementation across our US and Canada sites, as well as our Crate iOS app. I have 15 years of experience across business intelligence, marketing, e-commerce, and media. I also earned my MBA from Kellogg in specializations across marketing, media management, and entrepreneurship and innovation. I also started the inaugural testing teams at both Crate and Barrel and Allstate, and I also work on personalization today. This all really helps me in my current role and will be brought up in discussing our Okta implementation for Crate and CB2. So hopefully you're familiar with our brands, Crate and Barrel and CB2. If not, we are a large retailer that specializes in home furnishings with high quality as well as high design. We partnered with Okta to help us create that single customer identity, which is integral to our personalization as well as future projects that I'll talk about in a moment. We really wanted to improve our account sign-up experience as well as upgrade our security and fraud detection across our sites and our app. And I'm proud to say, as of January and February of this year, customers can now use one single username and password for registries and accounts across our sites and our Create iOS app. And really, we decided to go on this journey with Okta because our vision was enabling these enterprise omni-channel tailored experiences for customers. And taking this step with Okta really helped us with the foundational piece of creating that single customer profile or single identity. And in addition to that, we wanted to improve our security as well as our fraud detection enhancements for our customer experience. And laying this groundwork is really important for the personalization as well as upcoming projects we want to implement for our customers. We do personalization today, but in order to do one-to-one personalization, we need to be 100% confident that the customer attributes and the preferences that we're collecting are matched up with the right person. So this was a great first step in our omni-channel journey and will help us with that one-to-one personalization and with linking our one-to-one identities for loyalty and clienteling. Ultimately, we want to show customers and our associates what customers have told us they want, like, and need. So I hope you can learn from my experience as well as the hindsight that we have from this project with these 5 simple tips. The first tip being allocate resources and timing appropriately. This project took us about 9 months in terms of planning as well as development time, and involved about 60 to 70 people across business intelligence, marketing, e-commerce, design, as well as data management and quality assurance resources. So I would just try to manage expectations as well as timing and resources appropriately. The second tip would be to view the menu of options Okta opens up before you decide on an overall architecture. Our lead developers did the Okta training at the beginning of the planning sessions, and we had done some development work at the beginning as well. In hindsight, we would have done this planning at the very beginning before any development work was done so that we can have the overall architecture blueprinted at the very beginning. The third tip would be similar to Creighton CB2 having multiple brands and being across multiple countries. If your brand is like this, I would recommend choosing to launch with the one with the smaller accounts first. This was a great recommendation to Okta for us. We decided to launch with our Canada sites first, with our US sites going 2 weeks after that. And that was a great recommendation so that we could make fixes in between. And because our US sites have much larger volume, it minimized the risk and impact. The fourth tip is allowing ample time for testing pre-launch, on launch day, as well as post-launch. We allowed for about 2 months of QE time before we launched the Canada and US sites. And if I'm honest, we probably needed about 2 to 4 weeks more. So I would definitely plan that time, as well as the day of the launch. A best practice is to have your entire project team really test to make sure those customer experiences are running as expected. This also allows you to identify any issues very quickly and address them shortly after launch. We also wanted to monitor a lot of the KPIs we had at the outset of the project to make sure we were delivering on what we had told the business we were going to do. And that leads me to my fifth and final tip. Set up and publish a monthly scorecard. Not only does this help monitor the performance of the project, but it's also a great way to identify and socialize and publicize all the benefits from the work that multiple resources across the company just helped contribute to, as well as really show some PR for the customer experience benefits that you're providing to customers.
Hey, Christine, question on tip number 3. How do you manage the experience for users engaging across multiple brands during this migration phase, where you start with the brand with small number of accounts first?
Yeah, great question. It's something we thought about in our architecture too, and ultimately decided that, for example, if someone signed in with CB2 first and created that username and password, we notified our customers that that username and password would then be used to sign in at creightonbarrel.com as well. So that we provided that single sign-on experience for our registries and accounts and notified our customers. And on the next couple slides, I'll go through an example of our identity services scorecard, which hopefully will help you and your team design your own. This first slide really focuses on a lot of the customer experience metrics. So a lot of these metrics are pulled from Adobe as well as Google's BigQuery. We wanted to measure things like how many new accounts are we creating? What is the unclaimed to claimed conversion? Our login rates where we expect. And we also wanted to keep tabs on our checkout conversion rate, as well as how many people are signing in versus choosing guest checkout. This second slide of the identity scorecard really focuses on a lot of the metrics we gleaned from Okta system logs that we ingested into Sumo Logic dashboards. Here we're gaining insight into things like threat detection, failed login rates, how many times people signed in with invalid, or at least tried to sign in with invalid credentials, phishing attempts, and high risk scores. So this provided insight we didn't have before and has been really great for not only our DevOps, but uh, business users as well as other departments to learn from these metrics. And with this third and final slide of the identity scorecard, we're really partnering closely with our contact center and monitoring things like password reset contexts as well as account related contexts. Because ideally, with this implementation, you should be seeing less of these contexts in that volume. And again, it's another thing to hopefully use as some PR for the project to say that you're reducing that contact volume to the call center. And I'm happy to report in the initial weeks post launch that across both Crate and Barrel and CB2, as well as across the US and Canada, we're seeing increases anywhere from 10 to 16% of people actually signing in during checkout versus choosing guest checkout, which is great. New accounts are being created. And so far, CB2 is leading on turning unclaimed to claimed users at the highest rate. And lastly, as you can see from the chart on the right, we were able to identify fraudulent activity quickly as our Sumo Logic dashboards alerted us to some failed login activities that really spiked. And we were able to address it quickly, which is awesome.
Christine, that's a fantastic conversion rate from guests to signed in users. What do you think really contributed to that change in behavior?
I really think implementing the single sign on experience really helped bring that number up for people actually signing in and making it more of a seamless experience to sign in during checkout. So I'm really grateful we did include that in our scope for our project.
I concur. These are great numbers considering the volume which Crate and Barrel sees, and also considering also that it's the first go live with Okta. Christine, what's next in the customer identity journey at Crate and Barrel, and where do you plan on leveraging Okta further?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue building on the customer identity that Okta helped us build. And as I mentioned before, we're still going to be utilizing this and collecting more customer attributes and preferences and using that really to enhance our personalization as well as help us provide the foundation for upcoming projects such as our loyalty program and clienteling.
Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing the story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, CIAM sits at the intersection of security, customer experience, and analytics. As we just heard from Crate and Barrel, providing an easy and frictionless way for users to onboard and log in is critical for driving conversions and building customer loyalty. Protecting sensitive data from malicious intrusion and taking steps to prevent data breaches is central to a sound security policy and compliance with data privacy laws. And, and compiling user data into a single source of truth is essential to understanding your customers. In this picture, we have summarized the key phases of a customer journey and how your company's approach to customer identity can impact top line revenue as well as mediate bottom line security risk. First phase is customer acquisition. The moment an end user visits your app, you should start to know them via anonymous user's identity graph and map to resolve their identity as they convert to a guest user or a registered user. This helps you map their preferences, what they expect out of your platform, and you in turn can drive personalization to better serve them. The strategy we often see succeed is to offer a progressive profiling or fastest possible user sign up options, including sign in with Apple or Google, or by providing a passwordless option to not have a user interaction being interrupted by password manager pop ups. In each of these phases, security with a transparent oversight is recommended, such as bot detection, adaptive MFA, or even proof visitors' identities using a knowledge of document based identity proofing. These services should be optionally offered to keep unwanted guests or bots from consuming bandwidth of your service, which improves reliability and availability of your platform, which would ultimately enhance the digital experience of your brand altogether. Once the customer is on your platform, the next phase of the journey would be to engage with your brand services. From a CIAM platform perspective, you got to make sure you offer a seamless login experience for frequent visitors and also for returning ones to easily come and re-engage with your platform by using any device or channel of access. This is the phase where you would drive a lot of personalization in form of offering additional or complementary services. And this is done by tracking and analyzing their preferences via consent. These preferences are often captured by customer data platforms or CDPs and propagated to the other backend services. What you would also notice here is that a cloud architected and API first CIAM platform would provide you an agile development environment to roll out new experiences for your customers quickly. And to close the loop on the CIAM journey, customer care and retention strategies would help build a very, very loyal customer base. And hence, the platform availability, reliability, and security would go a long way in offering an impressive customer identity experience. What you would notice that security, trust, privacy, and compliance in the center, which you see, are few services which would run parallel in all of your CIAM phases. Now, in this session further, we have put together a few demos to dive deeper into each of these customer journey phases. And with that, let me hand it over to Andy to take us through the first demo on CDP integration with Okta. Andy?
Perfect. Thank you, Sandeep. During this demonstration, I'm going to show you a couple of different e-commerce flows and explain how Okta can integrate with a customer data platform as a CDP to provide you better customer interactions with your brand. The goal of the CDP is to collect and aggregate user data from multiple sources to give you a clearer picture of the complete user, regardless of how they're interacting with your brand. For the demonstration today, we have 3 products in our store. The user, browsing the site, is anonymous. We can track the pages they go to, but we do not know who they are. They're first going to add our cheapest product to their basket and go to checkout. When they check out, we're going to identify who that user is. In this case, we're going to collect just their email address and their consent for marketing. Our checkout process should be optimized to minimize the friction between the user and the transaction they want to carry out. So by collecting this minimal information, we ensure that they are getting through that checkout as fast as they can. That checkout will now complete. We see that we've been issued with 2 tokens. These tokens are necessary as our e-commerce backend requires the user to be authenticated to complete a purchase. In the backend, we took the user's email address that they provided and checked that against Universal Directory to see if they already had an account. Where an account did not exist, we've created a guest user within Universal Directory. We can see this within the ID token. We can see that the customer type is guest. We can see that the address for the token is the value that the user entered. So this is always done in the context of the user who is completing the transaction. In our access token, we can see again, this is the user whose email address they've entered, but it is scoped to allow them to place an order. Within Okta, if we go and look up that user in Universal Directory, we can see that they're actually of the guest user type. This user type helps us minimize the information we need to gather for that user. If we look at their profile, we can see we only have their email address. This is a different user type to our standard user, where we want to require the gathering of additional attributes for that user so that we can know more about our customer. Our guest user has access to just one application, our store. They're also a member of our guest users group. This user group is useful. It allows us to associate an automation with all of our guest users. If we go and look at the automations, we can remove inactive guests. This runs every night at midnight and checks for users who are a member of that group who have been inactive for more than 30 days. Once those conditions are met, that user is removed from Okta. Now this has a really important impact on the life cycle of your guest users. Returning guests within Okta are able to assume the account, the guest account that was created for them. If they return 4 or 5 times within a month, we don't want to create them multiple accounts within Okta. That makes management more difficult. It also drives up your licensing cost for holding each of those accounts. This way, the user assumes the same account each time. They have a consistent ID within Okta and within the CDP. And we make sure that you minimize your total licensing cost for these guest users. When our user returns as a result of retargeting, we might have sent them emails if they consented to email marketing. We might have directed ads towards them on a social network. They're going to buy our second product in our range and go to checkout. This time, when they enter their email address, they will be prompted to create a full account. Now, this is done by that search against Universal Directory finding an account. We can either allow the user to continue as guest and assume that account that was already there, or we can ask them to step that up to a full user account. So if we go and look at the create experience, this is then asking the user for the required fields to change the user type. So if I complete those now, we'll create the account. Again, we get two OAuth tokens minted for us. We have an ID token, which now is recorded as registered. You'll notice that the subject, so the unique ID of the user in Okta, is the same as that of the guest user. We have just changed the user's type from one to another. Any history of that user's interaction within Okta is persisted. If we look in the access token, again, the subject is that user, and they have the scope to place an order. Within Okta, if we look for that user again, we can now see that they are correctly assigned to the right user group. Their profile has been extended to then include the additional information they provided at registration. We log that user out. The integration with the CDP goes deeper. Each time one of those e-commerce transactions was completed, the application sent an e-commerce event to our CDP. In this case, our CDP is provided by our partner mParticle, who is recording that e-commerce transaction, recording which items were bought by which user ID, and updating that user ID's total lifetime value. This change event is then pushed out via a webhook. That webhook calls the Okta API and updates the user profile associated with that ID. If our now full-fledged user logs in, we can see that a discount has automatically been applied to each of the products. This has been done because this user now has a total customer value of 50. If we go and look at this user's groups, we can see that they've been added to a high value customers group automatically by group rule. This group rule is interested in the user's total customer value. Where that is in excess of 40, they've been added to a group. Within our authorization server, we have modified the loyalty claim such that if a user is a member of the high value customers group, then apply a fixed loyalty discount to that user's access token. If we complete our final purchase, we can then inspect the access token and find that that loyalty discount is present on the access token. Now, all of that interaction so far has been driven through a traditional web app, but our users are expecting much richer customer experiences than that. Sandy, can you show us how API-driven solutions can leverage that existing identity?
Absolutely. Thanks, Andy. I'm sure you all have experienced the power of APIs, and more so if it's in cloud and secure. In this demo, I'm going to showcase an example of a person registering their loyalty profile with a fictitious hospitality chain called Examply, who also happen to have a fine dining restaurant named Acme. Here I'm registering a user profile on a portal for loyalty rewards. I'm filling in some very basic details to get my loyalty account created. I'm also filling in a few details with regards to my communication and privacy preferences. And as I finish the onboarding process, I'm going to go on to an e commerce portal where I would be allowed to make some changes to my profile, including updates on my dining preferences, which would be grabbed shortly by other integrations using APIs. So choosing vegetarian over here as my diet restriction, my seating preference is outdoors. I have kids and I have kids with few allergies. So I've updated all my preferences over here and it'll be ready for my integration now. So I'm now browsing through Acme Restaurant's marketing page on Facebook and I decide to interact with the restaurant via Facebook Messenger. Here I have been greeted, and before I look at today's menu, I'm asked to link my existing loyalty profile, which I could either do it using sign in with Facebook, or since I had just registered for a loyalty account, I would just use that to link my profile with Acme Restaurants. So here I'm validating my credentials. And as soon as the credentials are validated, my account has been linked and I'm back into Acme Restaurants Messenger and I'm going to get today's menu. It shows vegetarian menu based on my preferences, which I had updated a little while back. And I get kids menu as well because I would have kids joining me for this lunch. And then it's asking me to book a table. It now have prompted me for an MFA or OTP code. It's based on the mobile number, which I'd registered or I picked up during the loyalty profile registration. It's asking me the date to have this booking and now the time for the lunch or dinner booking. Let me choose 12 p.m. It's asking for a number of people. And this all information can go back into Okta for future references based on consent. So within 60 seconds, I was able to interact with the restaurant's messenger app and also book my table and also update my preferences. This is the power of APIs and what it can deliver for an end user from a customer care and interaction perspective. If you look at what we did over here, there is a platform where I built a bot, and this bot was interacting with the customer in the front end and with Okta's APIs in the back end, along with the restaurant's delivery APIs as well as the booking APIs. Everything was orchestrated through this bot, but the power of a CIAM platform was leveraged over here while pulling up the loyalty profile, as well as challenging the user to authenticate and link the account and also update the preferences using APIs as well. That's what an API first CIAM platform would be able to deliver for your end user. Now, let's see if we have a use case where we need to onboard our users with even higher assurance and we want to prove their identities going further into the account. Now, even while we're introducing identity proofing concept, we do want as less of a friction as possible when we ask the users to prove themselves using a document or a knowledge-based identity proofing. So over here, there's another fictitious healthcare company, Examply Healthcare, and I'm going to register as a new user, as a patient, and I'm going to put my email address and phone, or password rather, my first and last name, and any other details which are required at this particular point, but I would keep it as minimum as possible for letting the patient access the portal as soon as possible. So this is the minimal possible kind of information needed at the time of registration. I would like to put in a verification step so that not everyone can register and be on the portal, but there's a verification required in the middle. So there's a simple email verification. I could have auto sign on the user for just the demonstration purposes. This user is logging in again, and they are going to land up in the healthcare portal now. Now, while they are in the healthcare portal, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update their consent preferences and would put that into Okta's universal directory. When I click on the show ID card, you're going to notice that this action requires the user to put their address information so that a nearby clinic or hospital can be mapped to them and they can get an ID card issued by the Examply Healthcare. So now when I click on the show ID card, you're going to see my name as Examply Healthcare just for demo purposes. And let's say if I go and view some lab documents or lab reports, it's asking me to further verify myself using a document based identity proofing in this particular case. So here in this integration, I've leveraged a partner identity proofing system where it's taking in the front and back of my driver's license. So I'm using a Michael Motorist driver license sample, which is front and back, and upload those samples. If you're on a mobile phone, you could upload it from your mobile phone's camera by taking a picture of the front and back. Once those are validated, that these are the front and back images of a same driver's license, it's going to be uploaded and the confirmation comes back to the user that your profile has been submitted for identity proofing. This information is going to come back into the portal via Okta, and Okta is going to issue a new access token for the healthcare portal to drive further authorization. Now you can notice that the identity proofing process has been complete, and the ID card now is issued in the name of Michael Motorist. So this was a perfect example of how quickly and easily you can sign up a user from a very basic access grant to a very secure access grant by delivering a progressive profiling based workflow to the end user as and when they're required to access more authorized parts of the portal. Just a little bit of a snapshot of what happened in the backend. When the end user interacted with Okta to create the user profile, there was a shell user object which got created over there. And as the user progressed towards more assurance based sides of the portal, Okta workflows came into the picture where it was waiting for the information in terms of the identity proofing to giving a status back that the identity proofing has been completed. And Okta workflows endpoint was then able to receive that status of the proofing process altogether, fetch the results in terms of the payload for Michael Motorist in this particular case, and get that update propagated over to Okta's universal directory. So this was an end-to-end orchestration of the identity profile originated from a user side, taking that progressive information from a user and then getting it validated and getting it back into Okta and also back into the portal. So all happened transparently for the user with very minimal interaction. And now we have a very highly assured identity present in the portal with all the access required. Now, let me hand it off to Payal to cover a last demo in this session on privacy and consent management. Payal?
So far, we've talked about secure data handling practices that build trust and provide amazing personalized experiences for your consumers. But how do we continue to do that while keeping up with the ever changing privacy regulations and laws? Now, before I talk about privacy management, I'd like to touch on Okta's security around our platform as well as compliance. When it comes to security, Okta provides a platform to manage your customer's identity, ensuring the security of user accounts, as we saw in the previous demos, with strong authentication, authorization, even threat insights and contextual access, all built into the platform. Our brand is built upon trust, and security, reliability, performance, and scalability are the most important foundational elements of our service. Okta holds a range of industry standard certifications, as you can see here, and we undergo audits. Okta acts as a data processor for customer data, and our service is designed to protect and secure customer data based on your business and compliance needs. All right, now let's talk about privacy and consent. Different privacy regulations that have emerged across various regions. We have regulations such as GDPR, CCPA, COPPA, that's Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and companies often have the need to comply with more than one set of these regulations. Looking further at these privacy regulations, there's a lot of focus on getting consent from your consumer and making sure that consumers understand how the data is being used and who it's being shared with. Consumers also have the rights under privacy regulations, such as being able to request for information, having the right to opt out of personal information sales, or right to be forgotten altogether. And companies are legally required to honor customers' requests. But you know what? It also helps you maintain that trust and loyalty with your customer. Now, to meet with these evolving privacy and requirements in a reliable manner and also meet your business needs, organizations should really examine their workflows and implement the best of breed solutions for privacy management as well as privacy request handling and automate it as much as possible. And these solutions should be able to adapt to dynamic global regulatory requirements as well. Now, this is where Okta is able to provide value by integrating with best of breed solutions focused on privacy risk management, like the Data Grails and OneTrusts of the world. And of course, we need to take the holistic approach, right, when it comes to it, because it involves people, process, technology. But for our session, we'll focus around how can we automate these workflows as much as possible. So we'll look at 3 demo scenarios here. So let's talk about the first one. Now, the first one, before I jump into the demo, I just want to walk through the flow. The first one is user registration. So as soon as the user comes to your site and registers on your website or your mobile app, behind the scenes, what's happening is the user is created in Okta's universal directory. Okta is then able to push this user down to your privacy management solution. In our case, we have OneTrust with Okta workflows with an event hook that gets created based on a user create event. And then the privacy management solutions also, they provide data discovery and mappings. And Okta tends to be the source for a lot of these applications for consumer identity lifecycle when it comes to downstream data propagation. And so here we can look at our demo. So here, as soon as the user registers on the banking side that I have here, we made examply even acquire a bank here. And so here you can see behind the scenes, what's going to happen is once I register as a user, I'm directly logging in the user to the dashboard for demo purposes, but I can look at my information around, just the cookie consent. I can look at further details. I can accept these preferences as well. And then behind the scenes, a user, in this case myself, gets created within Okta's universal directory. And also the user gets pushed down to OneTrust based on a user create event in our Okta workflows, as you can see as well. And we have the out-of-the-box connector for OneTrust to create the preference user. And we also have connectors for Data Grail. We have connectors for your CRM solutions like Salesforce, Marketo, and a bunch of others. Sandeep also mentioned Evident ID. You can see the connector there as well. So we do have out-of-the-box connectors available that are pre-built for that downstream propagation. And you can see that we do have the full audit trail on what happened to this user's information as well available in our workflows that you can leverage. So that was our first demo. So let's look at our second use case, which is preference management. I'm not going to get into these flows. They're pretty self-explanatory. I'll leave that for later because the demo speaks for itself. But here, let's look at the demo again, right? So here, now the user logs into your site, and we allow the user to manage their consent and preferences on the application. So here, when I click on Manage Preferences, I get routed to the Preferences Center in OneTrust, and I'm provided with the form here. And here I can change my preferences, what I want it on a weekly basis for my checking account as well as my savings account. And you can also update the preferences in your application. And then that can trigger a flow where, your attributes get created within Okta and then get pushed down to OneTrust as well. So either of them can be working that way. And the idea is once the user has updated their preferences, either directly in OneTrust or through your application, then the information also gets propagated to the downstream systems through these data mappings and data integrations with pre-built connectors. And so that's around preference management and what that experience would look like. Let's look at our third use case. And the third use case is around exercise your rights. And this can be, say, right to opt out, request for information, right to be forgotten, among a few. And so, again, let's look at the demo. And here, again, as a logged in user, I would achieve this by setting up seamless access from from your application to OneTrust with single sign-on with OpenID Connect. And so again, that takes care of your user verification, as you saw with not just the preferences, but also with your requests, privacy request forms. So here I will provide my information. I can select the options here as a customer. I want to be able to opt out of, say, my data being shared with third parties. So I can just fill that information and submit the form. And then as soon as I click submit, I get an email, in which case, it basically confirms that, your data is being processed. What this would do is this would trigger a flow again back to Okta with the downstream where Okta will then take that information again with workflows and send that information to the downstream apps that are connected through Okta, or even OneTrust or Data Grails have the integrations with data mappings as well. And the idea is to be able to update or delete accounts based on what the user has requested from the form. And again, if you have, large volumes of requests, automation is what's going to help you stay in compliance. And one last thing I want to call out here is that you do get audit trails across these platforms, as you have to be able to prove to an auditor that you're honoring the consumer's request. I know we've covered quite a bit, so now let's talk about some of the key takeaways from our session today.
In terms of key takeaways, at least for Crate and Barrel and CB2, setting up the Okta integration and that foundational customer identity is a key foundational piece while designing and delivering more personalized experiences, as well as setting up future programs like loyalty and clienteling.
Connecting your customer data platform to your IDP gives you the opportunity to really personalize and delight your users as they authenticate and authorize through your services.
A cloud architected and an API first CIAM platform is going to let you enable a lot of integrations with your existing and future platforms, as well as the higher assurance experiences should be layered on top of CIAM to drive fine grained authorizations in your platform for progressive access grant.
And last but not the least, compliance is critical, and fines should not be the only reason you should take it seriously. Consumers actually prefer brands that they can trust their data with. So you need an identity solution like Okta, as well as a privacy and consent management platform that can provide you with a full picture of your consumers when it comes to their interactions with your brand. And with that, we will wrap up our session for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Christine, we want to thank you again for joining us and sharing the Crate and Barrel customer journey. Thank you, everyone.